Brian Routh, the man who the FBI says targeted former President Trump in an apparent assassination attempt, is facing 2 federal firearms charges after he was arrested by police in Florida Sunday afternoon. The suspect was captured shortly after he allegedly aimed a rifle on a golf course where the former president was playing, though it has been now said by authorities he did not and never did have a line of sight to the former president, nor did he fire off a round from that weapon. Trump, for his own part today, took a break from the campaign trail and met with the acting director of the Secret Service, Ron Rowe. In response to this incident on Sunday, Vice President Kamala Harris said she is, quote, disturbed and condemns, quote, political violence. Late this afternoon, the acting Secret Service director gave an update on this situation and the moments after a Secret Service agent fired at the alleged gunman.
With reports of gunfire, the former president's close protection detail immediately evacuated the president to a safe location. The protective methodologies of the Secret Service were effective yesterday. The former president's protective apparatus allowed for the early identification of the threat and led to a safe evacuation.
Our Manuel Bojorquez is in West Palm Beach, Florida. Manny, always good to see you. What stood out for you from this press conference, which just ended moments ago?
Yeah, a full-throated endorsement there from the acting director of the Secret Service about the actions of the agents in light of all the scrutiny that the agency is facing after that first assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. We also learned more about the suspect in this case, that he has a criminal history, that a felony in North Carolina should have precluded him from owning a firearm. And that is what led to the charges that we learned about today here at the federal courthouse, where he had his first appearance before a judge. A charge of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and a charge for having a firearm with an obliterated serial number, an attempt to make sure that it could not be traced. There are questions about how he would have obtained that kind of a weapon. We learned more in the criminal complaint as well about his whereabouts in the hours before he was spotted by the Secret Service. A very startling, really, detail that was written down there in that complaint, that according to cell phone records, he may have been in that area roughly 12 hours before he was spotted, essentially lying in wait or preparing as prosecutors laid that out. What we did not hear today in this hearing is any notion of the former president's name, of the golf club, or the words attempted assassination. The indications are that on the legal side, these 2 gun charges are the starting point for prosecutors as they begin to really investigate, and that there could have a superseding indictment in the future that would contain even more charges.
And Manny, it was also said that based on what the FBI currently knows, and I want to underscore currently knows, no indication that there was anyone to assist Ryan Routh in what happened yesterday.
That's right. Their assessment at this point is that there is no indication that he was working with anybody else. But they are reviewing all of his social media posts, his conversations with people, phone records. They made a notion to already having spoken to family and friends in Hawaii. So that is all part of the investigation right now. I also want to talk about his demeanor for a minute. The Martin County Sheriff's Office issued or released some body cam video of his arrest yesterday in Martin County, just north of us here in West Palm Beach. And the sheriff noted how emotionless really he was, given the gravity of what he's accused of doing. Today in court, we saw a man who was very calm and relaxed, and at one point was even smiling as he was having a conversation with the public defender that was appointed by the court.
Manuel Bojorquez, as always, thank you very much. Anna Schechter joins us now. She is the senior coordinating producer for the CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit. Anna, we talked a little bit ago, but as you piece together what we have learned so far, and let's just pause for a second and say there is much more to learn, what stands out?
Well, the fixation on global politics and Ukraine didn't play into anything that we learned at this press conference. We've been looking, we as journalists, we're looking to be able to report out his motive. And we've been piecing together interviews that we've seen posted to other outlets, an interview with the New York Times in 2023, where he was talking about trying to sort of bring Afghan fighters to Ukraine. I mean, all of this kind of this fantastical talk. We're also piecing together his criminal record where he has the 2 felonies, which would have precluded him from being allowed legally to be in possession of a firearm. But then there is a whole host. If you look at his rap sheet, this goes back to the 1990s. He is a defendant in multiple criminal cases. Some of them smaller, like writing false checks or checks that bounced. And then others of them being in possession of stolen property. So we're trying to piece together the picture of a man who was at once passionate about the Ukrainians' plight, but then also has this criminal record and was in possession of a weapon of mass destruction, which our reporting indicates was also an assault-style rifle. This is back in 2002. We spoke about this earlier, but in 2019, several years ago, the FBI got a tip that he was a felon in possession of a firearm. We heard from those law enforcement agents earlier at the press conference that the FBI alerted local law enforcement on Oahu, but that the tip wasn't substantiated, and so nothing was done about it. That's an interesting tidbit that we learned from this press conference today, but there are still so many questions.
And as you mentioned, this is all part of an elaborate character sketch, and we don't know yet what parts of that sketch matter more than others. But you talked about Ryan Routh's passion about Ukraine. He did an interview recently with Newsweek. Let's play a little bit of that, and I'll talk to you on the other side.
A lot of the other conflicts are gray, but this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil. This is a storybook. You know, any movie we've ever watched, this is definitely evil against good.
Doesn't shed light on motives, but it does shed some light, maybe only limited light, on his orientation to what represents good versus evil.
That's exactly right. That's a great point. And also, do the ends justify the means? He was willing to fly to Ukraine, and he was willing to partake in this fight, potentially not necessarily fighting, but to support fighters. And this is not exactly, necessarily following with the law. The fact that he was encouraging Americans in other interviews that I've reviewed, even if they don't have a military history, to take up arms for Ukraine. I mean, that's his mentality. So this is somebody who was very passionate, but was definitely willing to go outside of the norms for, normal American support. Even if you're a supporter of Ukraine, not everyone was going to the extent that he was and making the claims that he was making, that he could bring fighters, for example, from Syria over to Ukraine. So this is kind of a character sketch that we're putting together of someone who's made sometimes outlandish statements, who isn't always adhering to the letter of the law, and maybe that's a little bit of an understatement.
Anna Schechter, thank you very much. This afternoon in Philadelphia, President Biden addressed the historically black colleges and universities conference. There, the president began his remarks by addressing the situation that played out yesterday regarding former President Trump.
Let me just say, there is no, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, those of you who know me, many of you do, no place in political violence for political violence in America. None. Zero. Never. I've always condemned political violence. I always will in America. In America, we resolve our differences peacefully at the ballot box, not at the end of a gun.
Nancy Cordes is at the White House with more on the reaction from the White House and the Harris campaign. So, Nancy, it's worth noting that this afternoon the former president said on social media, amplifying something he said in an earlier digital interview, that Democrats, specifically the Harris-Walz campaign, in part to blame for a rhetorical atmosphere that led to the events that played out yesterday. Reaction?
No reaction from the White House, Major. In fact, when we saw the president a short time ago as he arrived on Marine One on the South Lawn of the White House, returning from Philadelphia, he actually shouted to us from a great distance that he had tried to call former President Trump to see if he was okay, that he wasn't able to connect with the former president, and that he's going to try to talk to him again later. He also, as you played that clip, made a point of saying at the start of his remarks on a different topic today that he's glad that former President Trump is okay, and commending the Secret Service for keeping him safe and ensuring that he was unharmed. When it comes to the larger issue of Secret Service protection, Major, I can tell you that there is now stepped up Secret Service protection here at the White House and at the Vice President's residence, and that the White House has requested a short-term infusion of cash for the Secret Service, basically to ensure that it can operate at full capacity and do everything it needs to do to keep the candidates safe over the next 50 days until the election.
I noted, Nancy, I suspect you did as well, as that briefing was going on in West Palm Beach, Florida, the acting director of the Secret Service, Ron Rowe, saying that the assets that President Biden ordered were deployed and worked, trying to, if not silence, certainly counter or get ahead of any criticism that President Biden did not have what was necessary there in this particular situation.
Right. And that is important because the Secret Service is looking to indicate that they did their jobs, because they're under incredible scrutiny after what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, which you have covered extensively, Major, and others have as well. The fact that there were so many people, including members of law enforcement, who saw the shooter, who saw him behaving in an unusual fashion, who kind of clocked that he was where he shouldn't be, and yet took their eyes off the ball long enough for him to climb up onto that rooftop and take aim at the former president. And so they're making the case now that they did everything right, and that's why they were able to neutralize this individual, Routh, before he was able to cause any harm.
Politics continues. We are 50 days away from Election Day, and there was a meeting involving the vice president and the head of the Teamsters. Catch us up on that.
So the Teamsters is the only major union that has yet to announce its endorsement. All 9 of the other members of the top 10 have all announced that they are endorsing Kamala Harris for president. Yet you've got the Teamsters, kind of a lone holdout. They said they wanted to interview Harris. They had already done a sit-down with Biden before he pulled out, and that sit-down with Kamala Harris came today. That after the meeting, the president of the Teamsters Union spoke to reporters. He said that Harris really didn't say anything different than the president had said when he sat down with them, and that they hope to make a decision as soon as Wednesday. But he indicated, Major, that they may decide not to endorse anyone at all for the first time since 1996. That's a possibility. Take a listen to why he says this is such a tricky situation.
We don't just represent registered Democrats. We represent registered Republicans and independents, and we have to. So we have to take into consideration, and she recognized the diversity of our membership as it relates to political affiliations. So we had some discussion on that, and overall it's been consistent with every other candidate on the same questions and answers.
So basically what he's saying there, Major, is that they are taking into account the fact that a lot of their members support former President Trump, even if union leadership feels differently. And so they're polling all of their members. More than 1 million of them are allowed to vote. They'll be doing some more research as well. And based on that, they will make a decision over the next couple of days whether to endorse Harris, whether to endorse Trump, or whether to sit this one out.
Bipartisan history with the Teamsters and major political parties. Just ask Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much.